Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar, MDM and Governance Value Monetization, Real-Life Best Practices, hosted by SAP Insider, sponsored by Verdantis, Inc. I'm Steve Paul, and I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar will require the Adobe Flash Player, and you can download the latest version at the URL shown before you. You may maximize and minimize all elements of your console, from the slide area to the speaker bios, Q&A, and resource box by clicking on the blue or green icons in the upper right-hand corner. If you do minimize an element and want to see it again, just click on the icon running across the bottom of the console. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and our presenters, and later in the program we will ask for your feedback. You can participate in our Q&A session by asking questions about the information presented in this webinar at any time. Just type your question into the Q&A text box located below the speaker bios on the left, and then click the Submit button. We'll answer as many questions as time permits after our presentation. You may enlarge the slide window at any time by clicking on the green icon in the upper right-hand corner of the slide area. Slides will advance automatically throughout the event. And you can also download a copy of our presentation by clicking in the resource box in the bottom left of our console. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the Help ? Icon in the bottom right of our console. And if slides are not advancing, please press the F5 key on your keyboard to refresh your console. And now on to our presentation, MDM and Governance Value Monetization, the Real-Life Best Practices. Moderating today's topic will be Arthur Ruggett, VP Business Development for Verdantis, Inc. Over to you, Arthur.
Well, thank you very much, Steve, and certainly thank you to everyone attending today's event. Verdantis is a new name for many of you. It's a new name, but not an old company. We've been providing master data management and master data governance solutions to the Global 1000 for the last 10 years. The format for today's event is that we will begin with William McKnight. William McKnight is the president of McKnight Consulting Group. He is well known as a practical strategist, and his client engagements as lead enterprise information architect have garnered several best practice awards. William will leverage his experience of practical strategist to share real-world best practices in value monetization for master data management and master data governance within the broader scope of information technology ROI approaches. After William's presentation and baseline, we'll then get David Loshin's thoughts on monetization of the value of MDM and MDG projects. I'll introduce him more fully as his session begins, and we'll spend the last half of today's event on a panel discussion and audience QA. William, thank you very much. Over to you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, everybody, for joining. This is one of my favorite topics because this is what it all comes down to. So let's just cut right to the chase, to the bottom line, and talk about how MDM actually improves the bottom line of the organization. Now, David's going to fill in with some more specific examples, and I'm going to set the framework here for how MDM will ultimately be measured. I think it's a mindset as much as anything, a mindset well worth all of us taking in our MDM endeavors, whether we're thinking about it or we've gone down the path with it, but we have not really addressed this issue. So, investments in MDM, the returns are in the improved efficacy of projects targeting business objectives. Now, it depends on what you call MDM. Do you call MDM the governance process by which you are building the master records, or do you call it the data distribution process? I like to think of MDM as data as a service to the organization. I think some of its highest value is distributing clean data in real time to those systems that need it, delivering it consistently, and so forth. That's data as a service. And I believe that the governance part of MDM often is tied in with an application. So you take, for example, new product introduction, which is a famous example of master data management, one that we do a lot. New product introduction. You're obviously introducing new products in some way, shape, or form in your concept pre-MDM. It's a matter of what will the improvement be if you go an MDM way in doing that. And that improvement will result in better quality. So that better quality will result in better sales, presumably. You're going to be quicker time to market, and that's going to result in capitalization on opportunities that are available sooner, and maybe opportunities that you would miss otherwise. And so there's monetization in all that. And that's certainly part of, and certainly MDM supports that. But we might call that the return on investment for a new product introduction as supported by MDM. And MDM should be an integral part of most projects like that, and also projects like ERP projects, like SFA projects, like CRM projects, like data warehouse projects that need data. We all know that so much of those projects involve gathering master data, whether they call it that or not. They all need master data. And I like to say they're all getting master data. They're all doing master data management at some low level. It's a matter of doing it right. It's a matter of doing it more centralized and in a more enterprise fashion. And that's what we talk about a lot. Now, the key outcomes in MDM successes are these: reduced IT total cost of ownership for data management due to fewer systems and less overall processing. It's a build once, use many type of mentality, not build once to support an application, because they could have done that. It's building it once for the enterprise. It's building it to corporate standard, to corporate quality, and as defined by the business. And we like to get our governance group involved in defining that and then distributing that data in real time. Streamlining processes due to elimination of manual reconciliation. It's automated in master data management. So MDM is really funny because there's so many different value propositions to it. And you can tie your value proposition to any one, and if it indeed does exceed the cost of MDM, well, you've done something there. But I like to open up eyes to all of the various value propositions. And I talked about distributing data. I talked about how MDM is actually centralizing the formation of master data for the enterprise, and also the governance function, the function of building up those master records. All these are streamlined processes for the organization. Lessen the overall organization focus on the data warehouse. So whereas the data warehouse used to be the center of some of this activity, really wasn't able to be the center of all of the activity that we now do in MDM, but it did an okay job at it. Now we're pulling that function off into the operational area where it's more effective, where it gets out, involved, injected into systems in real time, operational systems that can actually use that information right away. So there's also an increased understanding of corporate data through homogenous data distribution. There's no project I can think of, and I've been around information for a long time, no project I can think of that will get you to an intimate level of understanding of that data, and there's so many side benefits to doing that in terms of understanding data and making that into a real corporate asset. That process of understanding it really opens eyes in and of itself, let alone the fact that you're going to centralize it and distribute it. Improve the ability to deal with compliance and data lineage by simplifying data infrastructure. So MDM, again, build once, use many times, simplifying data infrastructure, and these days I'm finding that helps out a lot with compliance and data lineage issues. So how do we go about determining what the return on investment can be for a master data management initiative? Well, we gather data requirements, and that's 3 words that spins up a lot of activity, potentially many months of activity. But what you don't want to do if you're an MDM in search of that first subject area to build out is spend a lot of time on this, because it's almost evident in most organizations which subject area, be it customer, product, or whatever, that you want to tackle first. The question becomes, how do we break that up into manageable slices? How do we assign stewardship for something potentially that's really large in our company, like customer or like product or like whatever subject area that we're tackling first? And that's the prioritization. That's the building the Iterative Deployment Map steps to return on investment. So you're breaking up into pieces. And those pieces, those iterations, if you will, have tangible metrics. What are you trying to accomplish with each one? Are you trying to streamline the process of getting that product in, new product introduction type of thing? Are you trying to distribute the same data and take workload off of the other applications that would be building this data otherwise? Are you trying to forge consistency so you have less redundant work, or you have a greater ability to take on the opportunities that the market presents because you have the one place to go that you can say, hey, that's centrally built, that's built to corporate standard. We don't have to do data wars here between departments. We have it done already. We have it built once, and we can use it for this purpose. Define the cost, which is relatively easy compared to the next bullet, which is to attain business quantification of returns. And I did say business quantification, so we want to get that from the business for each of those iterations, not from necessarily, if they're not in the business, the MDM build team, which is often an IT or rogue IT or what have you IT type of function in an organization. And present those probabilities or possibilities across the probability distribution and measure with corporate governance. And that's the business. That's the business, doing that measurement. So are they aware that they need to do the measurement? It's not just justification before the fact, it's measurement after the fact, so you can tune and go forward into higher levels of value to the organization. Now, again, like I said earlier, I think many systems are doing MDM. They're just maybe not calling it MDM or doing it well. And so doing it well would be taking on a bigger hat, a bigger scope, a bigger understanding, and a bigger level of scalability to what you're doing so that it can go on beyond the initial application and or the initial subject area and or the initial set of users for MDM. And so this is what we call an MDM program. So it's taking on that program mindset. So what does that entail? Because there's ROI to taking on a program mindset, and we call it total cost of ownership. We're going to lessen the overall total cost of ownership of doing MDM because we're going to build something once that can be utilized in many applications. And again, David's going to fill in some examples of this. But some of those program justifications are operational systems impact, reduced expenses there because you're doing less systems work, pulling data out of operational systems for multiple MDMs, MDM hubs that is. You're having a central MDM hub, one MDM hub for the organization, as big a part of the organization as you possibly can. MDM methodology and competence. You don't have different ways of doing MDM. You have the one way that you're getting good at, and hopefully that's an agile way these days. And also competence around that methodology, but also competence around tools. So MDM tools competence. You're getting good with a single tool that is multi-domain, that you're able to deploy across the enterprise. You're incorporating them into your culture. You're becoming part of the culture of that organization as well, maybe driving some of the direction of the products and so on. And you can do that when you have that single MDM tool that is handling multiple domains and intending to be the enterprise MDM tool. And then finally, enterprise subject areas, which is not TCO. That's improving your ROI because we're going to increase revenue and reduce expenses through enterprise subject areas by having the broader view of a customer, for example, by having some of the analytical attributes of a customer, you're able to market to them more effectively. Same thing for product. And finally, as we go forward with our MDM initiative, we need to bring people along with that initiative. And we need to take a focus on what I call organizational change management. And organizational change management is a multifaceted approach at bringing people along, at doing the soft stuff. And there's a lot of it in master data management, a lot more, especially as you get into governance and you put people on spokes of the workflow to actually add value or confirm data values and so on in the process of building out master records. To bring them along effectively is a lot of work, and that work needs to begin up front. And it's not just the people that are on the path of the governance, it's all of your stakeholders. And so there's the 6 boxes here. There's leaders, there's stakeholders otherwise, there's making sure the organization is ready for the change that's going to occur. because if you're actually going to change the way products are introduced, or we take on customers, or we change store locations, or we add a new location for a store or what have you, any of these things is highly impactful to the organization. And the organization needs to be ready to do that. You're changing people's jobs. So part of change readiness is maybe even changing job descriptions or changing how people are incented. MDM has that level of impact on an organization when done well. Engaging and communicating, broadcasting how other applications that are maybe being planned now can come aboard and use your application. Use MDM data. I ask two things of every application in an organization that has MDM. One, I asked, use the data that we have built in MDM. Don't go home growing it. Use what we've got. And if we need to enhance it for your need, we'll do that. Secondly, contribute your master data to the program so that others can benefit from that as well. Those are two principles to live by in master data management. Addressing organizational impacts, again, organizational charts, business functions, etc., and training the workforce in how to behave differently now that MDM is aboard, especially with governance, and also if you're working systems where you're getting data from, and again, contributing data to. So that's my background piece on where MDM value is found, and now I'm going to turn it back to Arthur, and I will talk to you later during the Q&A.
Well, thank you very much, William. Appreciate your insight so far. Before we move to David Loshin, a note to our audience to keep those questions coming. We'll answer everything we can towards the end of our session. David Loshin is our next presenter, and he's going to share with us his thoughts on value monetization for MDM and MDG initiatives. David is the author of The Practitioner's Guide to Data Quality Improvement and is widely regarded as an expert in the area of information value. He is also the president of Knowledge Integrity Incorporated, and we're glad that David can join us to share his real-life best practices in value monetization of master data management and master data governance initiatives. David, over to you.
Thanks, Arthur. I appreciate it, and thanks to the Verdontis folks for inviting me to chat about this topic, which is actually one of my favorite topics, largely because most of the situations and scenarios that we get involved in are environments where there's been some initiative that's already taken place, and there's a question about its relevance within the organization. And often that happens because it was triggered as a technical project as opposed to one that was fully ensconced within a context of business value. So what we often do is we take a step backwards and say, well, what is the expectation for business value improvement, and how is that related to broad scale accessibility to a unified view of shared master data, and how does that impact the organization as a whole? Largely because when you're transitioning from the visibility of data having been limited to data subsystems associated with a particular business function, from going from that to one in which all the organizations are beginning to share data across functions, you start seeing where some of the variances and inconsistencies that were irrelevant from the function perspective become magnified when you try to make use of that data in different areas of the business. And so what we often do is we take a step backwards and we say, well, what are the objectives of the organization, and what's the key business value propositions within the organization as a whole, and what's the mission of the organization? So we say, what are the organizational business policies, and what's the corporate mission, and what's the strategic performance objectives, and how are they organized in terms of what we might call dimensions of value? And we start out with these 5 high-level dimensions, and we'll start at the going clockwise from revenue, because that's typically the top-line target is the one that everybody goes to from first principles, which is seeking to increase revenues, whether it's through increased selling or whether it's more effective investment in new innovations or new companies or new subsidiaries, et cetera. Then going to risk management. Risk management, we look both from the financial risk perspective, whether it's monitoring credit risk, or whether it's the risks associated with corporate compliance with perhaps federal regulations or state regulations or different country regulations or regulations that cross borders, tariffs, et cetera, things like that. Again, the next one is managing customer experience and customer satisfaction, and how is information used to better improve the customer experience. Next one is corporate performance, and there we look at productivity both of our environments as well as our human resources. So it's human potential productivity. It's monitoring how well our systems are working, how well our parts are performing, whether we're able to aptly predict mean times between failures for items out in the field, and getting the right replacement parts on trucks from an operational perspective. And then the last one is also relatively high priority, which is cost management or expense management, and reducing expenses, all with the intent of maximizing profitability and reducing risk and improving the customer experience. So the question then becomes, everybody in the organization is expected to be contributing somewhat to one or more of these value drivers, but which ones are the ones that are most critical in the organization, and which ones are most dependent on the use of information, and which ones have the most opportunity for improvement as a byproduct of improving overall information use. And that's the point that we begin with. We can look at a number of different examples. For one is productivity in the supply chain. And here, again, it's a really good example of where the original intent of the developed applications and systems and their corresponding data subsystems are specifically designed to accommodate the functional needs of each aspect of the business. So if we go from left to right, we've got the sales team, and their systems are engineered to help make sales. And we've got the order placement system, which is engineered to optimize the identification of items and placing the order. And then we've got the inventory system, and we've got the picking and packing system and fulfillment, and we've got the supply chain and delivery, ultimately until we bring an item and deliver it to an individual's front door. Each one of those organizations has their transaction systems or operational systems designed to use the data as they need it. But in fact, if we look at the requirements for information as you look across that end-to-end process, there's imposition of demands that are associated with the end part of that process that are not necessarily top of mind at the beginning. So, for example, if the sales individual is in telemarketing, they're much more concerned about making sure that the customer information is correct when it comes to the telephone number. But they may be less precise when they collect the delivery address. However, if you don't have a proper delivery address, that's going to prove to disaccommodate the delivery of the item to the customer at the last part of that process. And these types of concepts become very critical when you begin to impose the types of cross-functional business performance metrics that have become very popular as large-scale ERP systems have begun to encroach within management of the way that organizations run their business. So we're no longer looking at how many sales an individual made, but we're looking at the reducing the time from when the sale was made to when the receivable was deposited in the bank, and so those two things are events that take place at different ends of that process. But we need to have shared information, whether it's shared information about a customer, shared information about product or part or location, or all those key issues or key domains that everybody is always talking about when it comes to creating a master data environment and imposing master data governance. So the idea here is that in order to get the improvements in the overall end-to-end business activity, we want to maximize the value of that shared information. And that means we have to understand the requirements for that data from across the different aspects of the different process flows that do cross the different functions. But we also have to enable a unified and consistent view of that underlying data so that we don't have the types of issues that occur when we don't have complete data, or when we don't have somebody overseeing the creation of a new product when it's being entered into material master, those kinds of issues. And this becomes even more of a challenge as organizations begin to understand that they're transitioning from being companies that are focusing on creating product and shipping out product to organizations that have to maximize the value of the information that describes that product. And I give a little hokey picture on this slide, which is it's the concept of finding a needle in a haystack. But in reality, as we're looking at organizations that are creating SKUs and products and parts, and are channeling through multiple sales channels that are distinct from your own environment. So an example might be you're a nail manufacturer and you're selling items through Lowe's and Home Depot and a bunch of other hardware brick and mortar shops, but then you're all in big boxes, but you're also selling them through numerous online e-commerce environments, and now all of a sudden your major product is no longer the item that you're selling, but it's the description of the item that you're selling, because it's through that description that the ultimate customer is able to find what you're trying to sell and match it really together. So instead of talking about it being a needle in a haystack, I often say that it's really you're trying to help your potential customers find a needle in a field full of needle stacks by having the best descriptive information. And so a master product registry is going to allow you to optimize the searching and location of those items based on the numerous identifying attributes that are relevant. So if you look at, even if you look at pins, you've got all sorts of different, like if I'm looking for a needle, there's all sorts of different kinds of needles: a sharp needle, embroidery needle, quilting needle, darning needle, bodkin needle, tatting needle. They come in different lengths. They come in different thicknesses. They come in different composite constructions. They have different kinds of coatings. And they have a different brand name, and they have different identifiers, and they have different alias names. And managing all that information, and I'm sure the people who are listening are nodding their heads in agreement that the level of effort it is to make sure that everybody who touches a piece of shared product information is trying to ensure that nothing goes wrong is probably a gargantuan feat. And master data management, and particularly the governance aspect of master data management, is intended to reduce the complexity of that workflow process to ensure that those downstream consumers of that data are the ones who are being best satisfied as a result of high quality shared information, and that to that extent we can roll it back to that concept that I started with, which is what's the intent of the business? If it's an intent to grow revenue, then what are the processes that are being put into place to grow revenue? Is it through cross-selling? Is it through upselling? If it is through cross-selling, what are the items that individuals like to purchase together, and why? And who are the types of customers that are looking at high probability of making that upsell or cross-sell sold bundle? And to do that, you need to have visibility into not just one domain, but a collection of domains that all interact together. So instead of just saying, well, we're going to start with a particular domain because it's obvious that we need it, you actually need to spend the time to assess the requirements for the particular business value drivers, or at least the top 3 or top 10 in the organization, and say how do the business processes make use of those items so that you can engineer both your repository and the processes that you use to oversee the population and use of the data in that repository in a way that does feed into increasing the different levels of value. So another good example here is packaging. Now, there are numerous organizations that make the same product and put it into 10, 15 different kinds of packages, and the same item may be packaged based on the content. It might be the volume. It might be the weight. It might be internationalized or globalized as a byproduct of regional differences or the location where the product is going, or different branding or different formulations because you're doing vanity branding for some other organization, or you might have French and English on the package if it's going to Canada, or you might just have Spanish if it's going to Mexico. It might have different packaging because of how you're transporting it, or what kinds of crates the boxes are being put into, or how it's to be delivered to your trading partners, et cetera. So there's all sorts of different characteristics and policies that are part of the business that are imposed on the packaging, and you need to understand the hierarchies and the organizational taxonomies associated with the packaging of the stuff inside, in order to ensure that the right requirements are being observed within the right contractual agreements that ultimately roll up to business policies, but fundamentally are managed as a result of high quality shared information. So not only can you use this data to ensure that your business policies and agreements are being observed, but you then, once you've got all that information, you might even recognize, and this is a good example, is a company that we had spoken to where they realized that their crates, the way the items were being packaged, that it turns out that instead of getting 20 boxes into a crate, they by redesigning the packaging, they're able to get an additional item inside a crate. Well, if you've got 40 crates inside a truckload, all of a sudden you're adding additional two crates onto each truckload, and thereby increasing the volume of transport and reducing your overall cost. So there's a good example of where understanding the usability of that information as a byproduct of the product master or material master yielded some significant and measurable dollar value or monetary value in reduced expenses, and that again rolls up to one of my five dimensions of value. So that being said, I think that in any organization, if you start out with the focusing on what the business value drivers are and identifying what the hot burning platform issues are, whether it's in lowering costs or increasing revenues, you're bound to find some real examples of where you can directly tie the optimization of unification of shared data to some real business value. And once you've done that, you've got some business performance metrics that can continually be used to demonstrate the return on investment for any kind of master data governance activity. And with that, I'll hand it back to Arthur, because I think some questions are coming in.
David, thank you very much. And yes, the questions are coming in. I'll be honest, I love the quote, "A needle in a field of needle stacks." When I look at that particular description and then think about William's section on overall ROI improvement through reduced TCO through streamlined process, I just see this ongoing need for doing a lot more with a lot less in terms of system and process and throughput. So thank you very much for your thoughts. Let me just do a quick refresh on the question list. And please, for the audience, continue to submit your questions while we go through the first couple. First question, and this is to you both. And David, I'll give you a chance to catch your breath and maybe start off with William. You've both given us some great ideas for value monetization for MDM versus MDG. Question to you, William, and then we can go to David. Is there a difference between the value realization for operational efficiency versus sort of hard dollar savings that might be associated with, say, supply chain in terms of how you might place value in hard dollar versus process and operational efficiency? How would you present those differently? William.
Maybe he's on mute.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, William, hopefully you heard the question. I'm sorry.
I did. I'm sorry.
No,
okay.
No issues. So you've given some great ideas in terms of ROI, optimizing ROI, minimizing TCO.
Gotcha. Yep.
Is there a different way that organizations would look at the monetization of value for, I'll say, hard dollar savings associated perhaps with supply chain-oriented MDM impact versus improvements through operational efficiency driven through MDG for the transactional or operational side of, let's say, a manufacturing organization?
Okay, so I think that that if you are improving the operations, if you're implementing operational efficiency, those are hard dollar savings right there. You're streamlining processes and doing that. You're getting product to market, which you can hopefully capitalize on, et cetera. But that capitalization is sort of the other side of the coin, right? That's more return on investment. What are we going to be able to do with the operational efficiency? How do we turn that into something better for the organization? But the operational efficiency does sit separate because you measure that differently, because it's processes you're doing anyway. You're just maybe not doing them as well or as fast or as with as much quality as you could be doing if you were to improve upon them. And MDM is certainly a way to improve upon operations and introduce efficiency. And so with that, you could compare costs, just strictly compare costs to get the justification on it. Now, how you capitalize upon those efficiencies is return on investment. So a lot of my MDM implementations are a little bit of both. We're doing operational efficiency, so we're saving costs for the company. Yes, we're doing that. But the bigger upside always comes in, how are we improving sales? How are we capitalizing upon opportunities? How are we streamlining our supply chain and so on? Those are bigger, but they're also harder to measure. And so I'm looking for exceeding thresholds and justifying projects that make sense for companies. And so to that respect, it is easier to look at the operational efficiencies and the TCOs and things like that to get going, but know that the bigger value lies in the return on investment you get from what you're doing with MDM.
Very good. And David, do you see a separate sort of ROI or value monetization for MDM versus MDG?
Yeah, you know what? I'm gonna kind of break out of that terminology because ROI and monetization are focusing specifically on the monetary value driver. Yet I'll give an example of an organization where I heard a case study where they were describing how implementing a master data governance activity focused largely on separating responsibilities and accountability for creation of new shared data. So instead of allowing multiple individuals to create new SKUs for what potentially could be the same item, they were creating a particular workflow process that enforced some degree of validation of data that was as it was being entered, especially when you had these bulk data entry activities that were being done as a result of partner arrangements. So they were getting parts or materials from their partners and trying to bulk load them into multiple times without really monitoring the information production. And finding that they were getting duplicates, they were getting variants, they were getting the situation where they couldn't ever find the item that they were looking for, and so instead of focusing on it from a monetary perspective, there was a risk to their business of either creating or investing in time and energy in entering information into a system that could never be found. Which then turned into loss of opportunity because when they were queried for availability of that item, if they weren't able to find it, they were certainly not able to determine whether they had any. But another perspective there is that the description of the process for the original process for validation was somewhat hypnotic in that they would take data that was entered and downloaded into a spreadsheet, and then force somebody to pour through the spreadsheet of maybe 5,000 or 6,000 items at a time, and have them scan through that to identify any potential issues. Now, I find it hard to read through one page of a spreadsheet without suddenly getting my eyes being blurry. But these were people who were forced to go through page after page after page, and I can imagine, and I'm sure you can understand that the amount of effort it would take to just continue to look at it, I think, dissipates with each page. The effort doesn't dissipate; the attention span dissipates as they go through this. So what they had done is they used some of the types of tools and technologies that are associated with master data and master data governance, but largely on the validation component of that, to automate some degree of rule validation associated with the requirements for validity of the data, on entry. And by doing that, they not only did they speed up the time to enter verified information into their systems, they also had an increased level of trust in the quality of that information, which then resulted in fewer breakdowns and need for reconciliation or research as to what happened to that data. And so you get the operational efficiency, but largely you get some degree of risk mitigation, because you no longer have the risk of not being able to find what you're looking for. And that just gives another example of how there's some degree of dependency across these different value drivers, that reducing risk also leads to increased operational efficiency, which ultimately leads to new opportunities that increase revenues.
Now, thank you, David, but this sort of falls into questions that are just coming in from our audience now. We've got a couple of folks on board, and they've asked the same general question, so let me sort of summarize them both, and we can maybe break them out. We talked about minimizing operational risk, improving efficiencies, which are all well and good, but the question that I've got from two of our audience members, how does one, or do you have any specific examples of how an organization might justify MDM as a discipline across a whole portfolio of products? I mean, how do you sort of extend that value to multiple individual projects? And then maybe I'll ask a follow-on question after you and William have a chance to digest that. Again, how do you justify an MDM initiative when it is something that's going to impact risk in terms of mitigating, improve efficiencies, but across a broad portfolio in the case of an enterprise MDM strategy?
So we've been in a couple of environments where MDM is being positioned as a technical activity that is supposed to lead to some number of miraculous business benefits, that include being a smarter company and making faster decisions and having a 360-degree view of your customer and all those sorts of juicy sound bites that ultimately are meaningless in the context of pure business performance measures, because no company measures how smart they are. I mean, I don't know. I could be mistaken, but I've done a informal poll at almost every live event I've been to, and I've asked people to raise their hands if their company has corporate smartness as one of their KPIs, and not a single person ever. Well, one person did, which was very surprising and stunning. However, the issue here is that master data management, at least in the way that we've kind of discussed it, is an enterprise activity, and most organizations are not organized to accommodate enterprise activities because they don't have an operational model that allows for essentially taxing each line of business for their investment in a shared service. So that is beginning to change when it's being positioned as a technology improvement, the same way services-oriented architecture is. But if you look at it, again, and this is why we take this approach of looking at the different dimensions of value, because there the idea is that if you can go to 2, 3, or 4 different organizations and identify how the same activity can be leveraged to provide value in 4, 5, 6, or 7 different ways, then you've got a measurable mechanism for monitoring how well that, not only how much it should cost to do it, but the value, the expected, anticipated lift that you're going to get. And if you've got that, if you are true to your word, then you're able to deliver the specific functionality that is relevant to each one of those consumers. Then you could provide some kind of incremental roadmap that allows you to get a little bit of value for each one of the silos early on, but then positions all of them to ratchet up into another level of improvement as they begin to benefit from cross-functional and enterprise-wide information sharing.
The ability to actually sort of measure the deliverables, so effectively helping to answer that "what do I get" question on a project-by-project or business line-by-business line basis is one of the enablers for that.
Yeah, and that's a problem with the traditional ROI model, because the traditional ROI business justification is an exercise for justifying the spend, not monitoring whether it was well spent. And what we're suggesting is that you need to do both. You need to get some real predictive measures, but you also have to continue to use those measures to make sure that you're getting the results that you anticipated.
Now, William, do you have any thoughts along the same lines, or even thoughts that are counter to David's opinions?
Well, I actually agree with David that MDM can be an enterprise activity, but like David, I've worked projects where it's more tactically focused on a single application or something like that. Again, the idea is that business justification, and then knowing that you're doing something great for the organization that can expand its horizons once it gets established in the organization. So I always mention up front, mention is a light word for it, I mention very strongly that MDM has the potential here to be the enterprise view of this domain, embedded in all systems that are out there, and so on. And but if we have to get started with like MDM for SAP, you might even be looking at a year job to do that. And that's just simply separating that aspect of SAP out into its own project. So that's not doing anything but that. It's putting MDM in the hands of data experts, which is a good thing to do, by the way, and it's rolling them up organizationally separately. But it's not the value that MDM can ultimately have within the organization. That is enterprise value, and that's multiple applications and so on, all the things that David mentioned and so on. So, I do believe in the traditional ROI view of all of these types of projects. But as I mentioned in my talk as well, that we do have to justify, but we also have to measure after the fact, and that only helps us improve our ROI to the business over the course of time. And you asked about MDM as a discipline. I also sort of addressed that as well when I said it's a program. And as a program for the organization, there are certain benefits to doing it that way. There's the benefit of having the single tool, having the single methodology and the competence and so on, and the approach and the API and the centralized team and all that sort of thing. There's definite value to a company of doing it that way.
To that point, you're bringing data up to a certain standard. Is there a standard? I mean, when somebody says, what quality standard do I need to bring my master data to? How do you answer that?
Yeah, I get that a lot. But the answer is really you want to eliminate intolerable defects in the data. And there is no outside standard that I can bring, that you can bring, that an analyst can bring or otherwise to an organization, say this is where your data needs to be. It has to exceed thresholds as established by the data stewards of that business, of those respective subject areas. And to that end, there are certain very finite set of data quality violations that data might violate. And so those are the things that we want to target, and we want to eliminate them on a priority basis over time, knowing that we'll probably never get to 100% data quality, but that's not the point. The point is to improve the quality and improve the business as you do that over the course of time. So there's no set arbitrary standards. It's really a customized, personalized standard that we develop with a client.
No, I mean, if there's no set standard, but it sounds like, as you said, intolerably bad data, that seems to be a long-lived process. Maybe a question for David. If master data is, or say master data management in general sense, is thought of as a project that is completed at a point in time, how do you go about ensuring that there's ongoing sponsorship to continue to improve the data, that there is ongoing engagement with the business teams, et cetera?
Well, I think the question there is really a different question, which is master data management a project that's completed when you're quote unquote done, or is it a set of disciplines that include the installation and deployment of software, but also other process improvements that are necessary, it's got to go beyond just dumping the data into a repository. And in fact, the creation of value doesn't come from consolidation. The creation of value comes from use and consumption. So the idea there is that when you put together your project roadmap, you can't focus it as we're going to go out, we're going to buy the tool, we're going to install it, we're going to put the data in there, and then we're done. Rather, the day that you're done loading, putting your processes together to populate your repository and making sure that the services are in place to continue maintaining the freshness of that data, that's the day you start, because that's when you've got to begin to engineer the functional migration or functional integration of that master data asset within the various and sundry business processes that are intended to be the target of process improvement and optimization. So we've seen situations where the investment is, there was a specific targeted investment of millions of dollars for buying the tool, loading the data into the product, and then they got that done, but the only consumer of that data was the people in the data warehouse, which was the source of the data in the first place. So they spent millions of dollars just to get to the point where they were 3 years before, and they were all out of money, and they needed to, and yet they needed to start socializing the idea of consumption of that master data asset among other functions in the organization. So ding, that's something you should be thinking about from the start, which is why assessing business value drivers and business requirements from more than just one area of the business is a critical first step before you even make the call to the vendors. It's going to help your vendors be able to better serve you if you walk into them and you say, here's the types of services that we need to be able to provide, and here's the constraints for completeness and consistency and identifiability and coherence and synchronization, as a collective view of our corresponding business consumers. And that goes back to what you asked before about whether there's any clearly defined definition of what makes something high quality. And there again, if it's conforming to the usability criteria that's specified by the process that you went through in soliciting your requirements from your collective consumers, then you've got an enumeration of quality criteria, or rather, I should say, usability criteria for that the ultimate master data asset. So I think I'm trying to take the same stone and hurl it at two different questions there, but I hope that. That helps.
No, thanks very much. Because there was a follow-up question to that from one of our audience members, asking for more information or additional thoughts on the pro-con of enterprise MDM and doing it from a broad focus versus line of business or function specific. and what your general thoughts are in terms of is there a better or worse way. And I might add to that, whether you go towards a federated approach or line of business, is it better to go all in, or do you want to do it in a phased, risk mitigating approach with, gated stage and that kind of thing? I guess I can throw that question back to you as a sort of a follow-up to yours. Do you have any additional thoughts on better approach, or is this always going to be customer or industry specific?
I think that the problem is that you can't just shut your business down for 16 months while you're building this one size fits all solution, right? And I look at it the same way I look at when I used to travel up to on the Route 29 as between here and Baltimore and seeing lots of construction going on at various places along the way, and then one day driving up there and finding that I was driving on a completely different stretch of highway, because in the interim, while they were building the new highway, they had created all sorts of different mitigation factors to enable traffic to keep going north and south to get where it needed to go, even though they were completely replacing the road and moving it 200 feet to the east. So basically, my guidance often focuses on identifying a long-term strategic objective for what you want to have your master data environment providing.
Mm-hmm.
To identify interim milestones and deliverables that provide value at a localized level, so that people see that their investment is yielding some results. And to that end, you can't go all in and try to build that one solution and just kind of deliver. Eating. I guess I've heard people talk about boiling the ocean. I've heard people talking about trying to eat an elephant. And I guess if you combine them, you could, boil an ocean full of elephants and have elephant soup. But I think it's probably better to go to the butcher and get a 2 or 3 pounds of elephant and boil it in a soup pot, one chunk at a time.
So it does sound that even as you go after this sort of phased approach or chunked approach, being able to define in advance, what do I get, and being able to measure that so that those who are funding or sponsoring or the key stakeholders can see measurable impact, measurable value as a project progresses or expands throughout an organization.
Yes, and I would not focus it specifically on a domain, on a data domain level, because if it's like, I'm going to build. If I say, okay, well, first I'm going to do customer and then I'm going to do product, it's like saying I'm going to string up a bunch of electrical wires. And I'm going to start by building one really big pole here and then building another really big pole somewhere else, instead of kind of mapping out what my strategy is for where the poles are going to go and when am I going to buy my poles and how am I going to put them together and how am I going to get the wire up there. So it's the same kind of analogy,
sure.
which is while I'm putting those poles up, I can deal with other utilities that want to share that utility pole at the same time. And maybe add additional value, even though it doesn't 100% focus me on delivering the be all and end all of master data management and master data governance, but rather delivers improvements to the way people do things, or better method for entering material master, or ensuring that the quality of that data is just a little bit better every other month, and that way people see continuous improvement. And they'll ultimately get the long term.
Very good. Thinking about utility polls or polls and surveys, before we go to our final question, I just wanted to remind all the attendees, at the request of the fine folks who are presenting the webinar, please take a minute after our last question to fill out the survey before we leave the session. Probably the one last question to you both, and I'll start with William. William, what are your top 2 takeaways that you would like the audience to bring with them as we close out today's event?
Well, I do want them to think about business justification for these MDM efforts, and not have them be strictly technical efforts. I want them to think about do they exist as a program MDM for improving the revenue of the company? Is that why they exist? Or are they trying to reduce the expense of the company? It's really that simple. And maybe it's a blending of both, and that's okay. But what are the quantities that are going into each of the glasses there? And how does it manifest? How does MDM manifest itself into those glasses? That's a very important lineage to draw so that you can not only justify your efforts, but you can justify the fact that you're going to be ongoing. And that's the other aspect I think I want people to remember, is that these programs live and breathe on an ongoing basis. And theoretically, they may supposedly be quote-unquote done as a project someday. Realistically, I've been doing this for a number of years, and I have no client that's done with MDM. But that's a good thing because they keep on going and adding value within the organization and adopting to new systems that come along and so forth, and they keep getting new customers that are subscribing to their data and additional changes to the governance process to streamline the take-on process of data even more, and so on and so forth. And so those are the two things, really.
Very good. Thank you, William. And David, do you have any additional takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I would point out, one other thing, which is learn how to have a conversation with your business consumers that doesn't involve asking them what data items they want to have mastered, because they may not realize what that means, but they will tell you what they do and what causes them to be successful and what causes them to fail. And use your intuition to understand what the dependencies are on information use and utility, and then training yourself to become effective at translating a business expectation into an information requirement, and use that as a way of framing what value really means at a data policy level, and that feeds into the whole master data governance perspective.
Very good. I know we've run a few minutes late. We had a lot of questions come from the audience, which is great. Appreciate that from the audience overall. With that, I'd like to thank you, David. I'd like to thank you, William. I'd please invite anyone to download a copy of the presentation, and I'll turn it back to Steve and let us go forward.
Okay, well, thank you all, gentlemen, for an excellent presentation and Q&A. And for more information, please refer to the contact information that is there before you. Thank you all for attending today's webinar, MDM and Governance Value Monetization, Real-Life Best Practices, hosted by SAP Insider and sponsored by Verdantis, Inc. Shortly after this live event, we'll send you an email reminder to access this presentation on demand. And on behalf of our guests, we'd like to thank you for your time, and have a great day.